More life and times of George Washington. I just want to take a moment and go into a little more detail about the ambush at Jumonville Glen and talk about the role of Half King in this particular story, because the story of Jumonville Glen really doesn't make sense without understanding the role of the Half King. And Half King was also known as Tanacharison, and he was known to the British as Half King, and he was the leader of the Mingo people. And the Mingo were a group that Washington had used in the past as scouts on his surveying expeditions and also his diplomatic mission to the French. Now, Tanacharison was a powerful figure in the Ohio Valley. He strongly opposed any kind of French expansion, and the French, had threatened his authority. They had undermined, native influence in the area and pushed into the land that Half King had considered his own. And so when Washington learned of a nearby French detachment, he didn't act alone. The Half King encouraged Washington into action. Now, Washington, that young, naive 22-year-old at the time, was looking for advice where he could get it. And so Washington and his men moved into the ravine at Jumonville Glen before dawn, and they surrounded the French camp. Shots were fired, several French soldiers were killed, others surrendered. Now, what happens next is probably the most controversial part. And according to multiple accounts, after the fighting stopped, the Half King approached the wounded French officer Ensign Jumonville and, with a tomahawk, put him up against the tree and killed him. Now, this act shocked Washington, and Washington did not have control over Half King in this incident. Now, for Half King, for Tanacharison, this was not a European-style engagement. It was political, and it was a symbolic act. The French were not welcome, and negotiations are over. Jumonville had been, as the French had claimed, on a diplomatic mission, not a military one. Now, that claim turned the skirmish into an international scandal. Washington, young and inexperienced, found himself caught between European rules of war and the frontier realities of Native Americans. And so the Half King's actions escalated the situation immediately. Within weeks, France and Britain were preparing for full-scale war. And at Jumonville Glen, three different worlds collided. You had British ambition, French expansion, and native resistance. And all that, there was consequences that went far beyond that ravine at Jumonville Glen. Thanks a lot.